Welcome in, everybody, to another YouTube live show. I am John Kurtz. Tonight on the show, we've got Brett Yormark to talk about, people. Brett Yormark spoke. It was a conference call with reporters, and he said a lot that I think leaves you to read between the lines. Namely, what exactly does he mean by the Big 12 is open for business now more than ever? Okay? Now more than ever. Does that mean that we are to expect that he will be making some aggressive realignment related moves here? I'm not sure that there's a whole lot that you can do. And he did go on to tell reporters that they're not, at least right now, directly looking at expansion targets. But we all know what's going on in the ACC. We all know that Brett Yormark is a very calculated guy. So are these comments, is this the type of thing that is going to be kind of a warning shot? Is this Brett Yormark calling his shot? What exactly is this from Brett Yormark? We're going to discuss it on the show here today. We're also going to discuss the fact that Brett Yormark is seemingly in, or at least not opposed to, what I proposed on the last live show and clipped for you on the channel earlier this week, which is the discussion about private equity or private capital, if you will. Because again, be careful calling it private equity. It is really private capital. They would like you to know that it is private capital, and in all honesty, that is supposedly what it is. But Brett Yormark is not shutting that idea down. He was asked about that. There are also, I think, some slight financial concerns across the league based on the fact that we found out the Big 12 did distribute a record number of revenue to all of its members. Of course, there are now more members. There are 4 new members that came in this past year. So that has affected the distribution to each school. So that is causing, I think, some issues in some places, at least what I have heard from around the league right now. So there are some financial concerns for the Big 12 that we can talk about as well. If we want to get into the lawsuit that's happening, of course, in the ACC, the interesting headline there is that the Big 12, the SEC, the Big 10 have all come to the ACC and ESPN's defense in court. Not a headline that I was expecting to see, right? All the other conferences are rushing to the defense of the ACC and ESPN in court. So if you are somebody that's pretty anti-ESPN, you're going to have to reckon with the fact that right now the Big 12 is basically coming to their defense. Clemson continues to try and make the argument that, hey, if we leave the conference, they don't actually have the rights to our games. And this may be the most infuriating topic of the night, or the one that would drive potentially the most discussion or drive most of you to drink. And that is that the SEC propaganda machine is already churning out a lot of fodder about, hey, a 9-3 SEC team should be getting in over like an 11-1 Big 12 team. And that's something that you're going to have to prepare yourself to deal with, that an SEC team could be getting in at 9-3 over like an 11-1 Big 12 team, assuming that that Big 12 team is not the conference champion. And Dennis Dodd was the one to write the article from CBS Sports. It was really just a compilation of a bunch of quotes. But the SEC, we know how good they are at propaganda, how good they have been at propaganda. That's why the league is where it's at. They've been very good at that for decades now at this point, at least working on like a decade and a half since they really took over the narrative as like the preeminent college football force that is out there. So it should not come as a surprise, and it's something that we all need to know about, I suppose, be ready to combat if there is anything that can be done. But hell, ask Florida State about that and how that goes, if there is really anything that can be done. So a little SEC propaganda for your Sunday as well. And if that wasn't enough, not only do they have ESPN on their side, but the SEC's got Netflix now. They've got Netflix. So the SEC continues to just leverage everything, man. They're so good at leveraging everything in their favor. And a part of that now is going to be Netflix. So we're about to get things rolling. That's what's on the docket tonight. If you want to be a part of the show, multiple ways that you can get involved, multiple ways that you can help out and support the channel. You can get on the show tonight by clicking the $ below the chat box. It will create a super chat. You attach a donation to your chat. Ensures that you make it on the show tonight. I will read your question or comment. Also, just a great way to support the channel. I couldn't do it without all the support from you guys, and I genuinely appreciate all the generosity there. Seriously, could not do it without all of you guys who do help in that way. So thank you so much. Also, if you can like the video, totally a free way to support the channel. That would be amazing. Just like the video, one click, that's it. All it takes. Continue to load up the comments. That also does help. The more that you comment, if you're watching after the fact, comment underneath the video. That really helps me as well. And of course, you can also contribute on Venmo to the conversation. It is John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo. If you do drop a donation there and leave your question or comment with it, I will kick off the next show with it. And that's how we are about to start the show here today with my guy, Clint. Much appreciate you as always, Clint. Thank you so much. Clint dropped one in at John-Kurtz-4 and says, great interview of Pardini. So he is talking about Nick Pardini, who was on the channel. I did that interview maybe like a week ago and was just trying to work it in among stuff that was like, because this is a more evergreen interview. Anyway, I dropped it earlier today, so make sure you go watch it. It was really enlightening about a guy with a finance background who was a college football fan. He's been a little disenchanted by it lately and turned off by it. But a guy who has followed college football and looks at industries and finances and what's happening here and says, hey, the path that college football is going down is the path of an industry that is not growing. It's the path of an industry that is not very healthy. And he doesn't see a very he sees a very bleak long-term future for the sport of college football because of that. So really interesting take. And I would highly suggest that you go check out that video as soon as we are done here tonight with the live show. So Clint says, great interview of Pardini, less students, less high school players. Ouch. Yeah. Part of the case that Nick was making here is like, hey, if you look at this long-term, I mean, there are going to be less and less students enrolling in college based on just kind of the current climate and direction that is moving in today's day and age. Plus, there are less high school players playing now with some of the concussion stuff that has happened, just less youth football being played. That can be a limiting factor here on top of the consolidation, which is the main part of it. He points out how the consolidation of the brands, like consolidation is something that typically happens in industry when there's no more growth left for an industry. Clint says, Mac Rhodes says we need to get better at football. That was the reference to the great 365 interview, who they are just nails when it comes to getting the best interviews around here. But Clint says, I wonder if this is a pipe dream. He wonders if it's a pipe dream to get better at football. Maybe Brett Yormark is right about basketball. BYU is amped about basketball. Ryan Smith and Danny Ainge are invested in BYU basketball. Football seems quiet here. Okay, well, I know that BYU definitely seems amped about this hire, as they should be. They absolutely should be. And I understand how football is a little bit quiet right now. Football is just trying to get back up on its feet after a tough stretch, tough intro to the Big 12. So I can understand that. Don't give up on football. And certainly the league should not give up on football either. All right. Nobody give up on this. But I am with you that, yeah, the way to go seemed to be to try to create some kind of extra advantage with your basketball, leverage your basketball. Unfortunately, it seems like Sankey may be coming to steal that as well. But I'm happy for the excitement around BYU basketball, Clint, for sure. It is very, very warranted. I got to be honest. I mean, not that I think Mark Pope necessarily fails at Kentucky, but I kind of feel like BYU may have like upgraded and just hit a home run by the way all of this happened. So either way, I'm not going to be here to totally run down Mark Pope, but you may have gotten the better end of that trade. Anyway, Clint, thank you, my guy. Appreciate your support as always. Truly great to see you at the beginning of the show here. So again, if you want to be like Clint, John-Kurtz-4 in order to do that, you can also click the $ below the chat box if you are live in the chat right now. Okay, Brett Yormark, not shy when he had his turn on a conference call with reporters this past week. He never is, right? Never is. Here's the first quote that really stood out to me that I saw from him. He said, quote, "We're more relevant now than we've ever been." I'd have to really take inventory of that. Is the Big 12 more relevant now than it's ever been? I think the Big 12 is like more innovative now than it's ever been. I think Big 12 basketball is probably more relevant now. Well, with Houston coming in this past year, I would say it is more relevant than it's ever been. And you have Arizona coming in next year, too. So, yes, I would say Big 12 basketball is undoubtedly more relevant than it's ever been. The conference as a whole, I mean, Oklahoma won a national championship in 2000. And at that time, you still had like Nebraska was just starting to slip a little bit. They were still clinging to the national championships of just a couple of years before that. K-State was a perennial top 10 to 20 team at that point, too. So, I mean, I would argue that the Big 12 has been more relevant before to the national landscape, especially when we're talking about football. But Brett Yormark needs to sell it, right? This has to be the guy to sell it. He needs to give you the big time pitch. And he's trying. All right. He's out there trying. And I can appreciate that he did that. I can appreciate that he's putting on that type of someone's got to be out there selling the league, right? And that's what he is good at. If Brett Yormark isn't going to do it, nobody is going to do it. We can certainly try here on the channel and us as fans, but Yormark has to be the guy that is leading the charge on that. So I can see where he is going with that. And if his point is just like, hey, we're making more moves than we ever have, we're being more proactive than we ever have, that is unequivocally true. I mean, that is definitely true. The Big 12 is not this like progressive, upbeat, like upstart kind of league back in 2000. It was very much more in the realm of everything else, and we lived in a more equitable Power 5 world. So that was one. Brett Yormark pumping some sunshine on the Big 12 there. And you could argue, I suppose, that this piece is pumping some sunshine as well. He said, quote, when I took this job, I said the Big 12 was open for business. And I guess you could say we're open for business now more than ever before. Now more than ever before. So what does it mean? What does it mean, Brett, that the Big 12 is open for business now more than ever before? Remember the last time Brett Yormark made an open for business comment that drew the ire of George Kliavkov. It did lead to some tremendous back and forth. It led to Kliavkov saying we haven't decided if we're going shopping there or not about the Big 12, which of course now is just doused in irony as Kliavkov sits on his ranch in Montana with like an $8 million check coming in from the Pac-12. Good gig if you can get it. But that comment really ruffled some feathers the first time that Brett Yormark said it. And there was no real hiding what the agenda was, even if he wasn't directly coming out and saying it. Everybody knew based on the climate at that time, like, hey, you've got to fight for survival. And there probably are not going to be, there probably is not a world where the Big 12 and the Pac-12 both survive. So you're sitting here trying to wait, circle the waters, pick up the scraps. Whatever it is that you can jump in and get there out of the Pac-12. You need those four corner schools. Like nobody was beating around the bush about what it was that Brett Yormark really meant, even if he wasn't coming out and saying that. And he typically is a pretty calculated guy. He is going to be like, in terms of how he navigated the TV deal, right? He was very calculated and making sure that he stepped in front of the Pac-12 on that. Well, Kliavkov was kind of dragging his feet. Like, Brett Yormark thinks about these things. He is a marketer at heart, so he knows exactly the power of his words. And that's why I always think we need to dive deeper into what is being said here. He is a guy who knows exactly what he is doing and trying to manipulate narratives. Even back to, I always love to reference the Gonzaga thing, right? I mean, Gonzaga is not in the league, but remember how irked the Pac-12 media folks got when Brett Yormark was really the first to start controlling the narrative on like, hey, Gonzaga may want to join a Power 4 conference for basketball. And at that point, the Big 12 beat the Pac-12 to the punch in getting that story out there. It was a Pete Thamel article, and that seemed to me like a pretty masterfully done stroke of PR. That the Big 12 was having talks with Gonzaga when clearly the Pac-12 had chatted with them as well, but the Big 12 got the headlines. So what does this mean? Because we do know that it means that, at least according to Yormark, they are not directly targeting other schools right now. That was a follow-up after that quote was tweeted by Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports, he followed it up with Yormark also clarified they're not directly going after another school right now. So I think we all knew that Brett Yormark wasn't going to come out and say like right now, oh yeah, we're totally going after somebody, because if you're one, that's just not great strategy anyway. But two, even if you were to say like, well, screw it, we'll just come out and say that, like everybody's going to look around like, what are you talking about? Like the ACC, while this is being disputed in court with 4 different lawsuits in 3 states, the ACC still right now has got you locked down. Like nobody's leaving from the ACC. Obviously, you're not getting anybody from the SEC and Big Ten. And I guess Washington State and Oregon State are out there and seem to always be the subject of rumors that people want to toss around there. And I get it. If you're an Oregon State or a Washington State fan, you might be more willing to peddle in some of those rumors. But that's probably not on your plate either. So there really is not any sort of obvious option there like there was the last time Brett Yormark said this and you were thinking about the 4 corners. Like there's not something that is nearly as sensical. You're still waiting on ACC D-Day to happen before you can go try to scoop somebody else up. So is this about Brett Yormark firing a warning shot into the air? Like, hey, we're waiting, ACC. Like, hurry this thing up. We'll be there. I would profess to you that is probably much more just a, hey, in all aspects, we're trying to figure out anything and everything we can do to make this league better. We are trying to explore any and every avenue we can to make this league better, while still floating out there like, hey, if and when this happens, Louisville, if and when this happens, Pitt, if and when this happens, perhaps Virginia Tech or NC State, if and when this happens, perhaps Duke. Well, if you ask Andrew Carter, who I had on the channel within the last couple of weeks, who covers all the schools in the triangle, that didn't seem very likely. But he's saying, hey, we are here. We are here. Let us be your cushy landing spot. That was basically what happened with the 4 corner schools, right? Hey, if things don't work out, we know you guys would love to have stayed, particularly the Pac-12 schools, in that conference. You're home where you've been. But if it doesn't work out, we're here. We're here for you. The Big 12 is open, okay? We're trying to stay on your radar. It's really more how I took it. Plus, in college athletics these days, if you are in Brett Yormark's position particularly, you have to always be open for business, ready and waiting, ready to react, ready to do whatever it is that you can that can up your conference, that can make your conference better, improve your positioning in the national landscape. You just have to be there for it. So I do think that is a big piece of it as well. Because if you're the SEC or the Big Ten, I mean, it's like, look, yeah, we can add somebody at some point, and it may well happen. And it sounds like the Big Ten, at least according to Brett McMurphy's reporting from this past week, that the Big Ten would be the more likely candidate there to go grab a Florida State or a Clemson right now. But you can't publicly say any of that. You can't publicly insinuate any of that, or else you're going to be wrapped up in these lawsuits, right? You will be wrapped up in all these lawsuits that are happening in 3 different states and 2 different suits on each side that are going back and forth. You don't want any of that. Like, hey, if they get free, we can take somebody, but we are not actively seeking anything. 1, we're the SEC or the Big Ten. We don't need to. And 2, we don't need that. We don't need that trouble. We don't need the law interfering with what we're trying to do as a league right now. So I believe that to be a part of the reasoning for that statement from Brett Yormark. Look, the guy's going to be open and honest. He's going to be fairly brash. He's going to be bullish on the position of his league. And that's how these comments really came across. I did mention this briefly, and I want to get to the private equity and private capital discussions here in just a moment, because that to me was the most exciting thing to me, I would say, out of what Brett Yormark said, because I have recently, as you guys heard on the last live show, come around to this idea as something that could be really beneficial to schools in the Big 12. But we've got Houston, UCF, Cincinnati, and BYU received $18 million in revenue from the Big 12 this year, $19 million next year. They'll get a full share beginning in 2025-26. Existing members will see some dilution in annual revenue payout this year due to the arrival of Houston, Cincinnati, UCF, and BYU. Commissioner Brett Yormark said. Look, I think that was known, but I do also think it may be causing a bit more financial stress on some of the schools than what was initially anticipated or what the schools initially thought. So I will just put that out there. I think it's not a super fun time to be one of these athletic departments anyway, trying to figure out how it is that you're going to budget for the revenue share piece of this that is coming up. And on top of that, you are getting a little bit less from your annual payout for the Big 12 because of the new schools that have been added. Necessary evil. You had to do it. If you were going to survive, you absolutely had to take in those 4 teams. It's not trying to throw any blame out there or anything, but it is another bit of financial issue on the plate here. And you've seen things like look, K-State is they're giving up a home game against Iowa State to go play in Ireland because they're getting a $2 million plus payday from that. I believe the report, I think the Manhattan Mercury had it at $2.25 million was the payday that they're going to get, plus all the expenses paid to go play that game. I mean, in an ideal world, they do not want to be taking away an extra home game from the local economy and one of the more enticing home games on the schedule. But everybody kind of needs money right now. I mean, that's the name of the game. It's really important. And it's not just that you're going to have to grapple with what do we do with the revenue share in this new world of college football, but you're going to be getting less in payouts from the NCAA, right? Because remember, you're going to have to pay back all the NIL back pay in the House lawsuit. And then you're getting a little bit less from your annual payout from the Big 12 here, as we learned from Brett Yormark on that call. So there's just a lot. There are a lot of things pulling at you financially right now, and perhaps some tough decisions that are going to have to be made in athletic departments. So that was just something I wanted to touch on a bit there, that is something you will need to keep in mind. That is something you will need to keep in mind about how all this is going. It's not just all roses and rainbows financially for a lot of Big 12 schools right now, I do believe. But on the private equity and private capital discussions here, I already floated this as like, hey, this seems like something that could really help the Big 12. Dan Wetzel helped get me there and convince me of that on the Yahoo College Sports podcast. But Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark was asked about private equity. This is a tweet from Ross Dellinger, and Yormark's quote was this, quote, "Private equity has been out there in the news and people are thinking about it. In some respects, private equity is a validation of where this industry is going and the growth. I don't look at it as a bad thing." The key there to me is just the end of it. I don't look at it as a bad thing. Is it an ultimate sign of growth and like where the game is at? Well, if you ask Nick Pardini in that interview that I dropped on you earlier today, he would say, no, this is not really a game that is growing at the moment. Yormark and Greg Sankey, honestly, what that sounded like is the case that Greg Sankey was making for it, where he's like, hey, people want to invest in college football. That seems like a good thing, right? They feel like there's room to grow here. I would disagree kind of in the overall big picture. I'm with Nick Pardini and what he is saying. But whatever it takes for Brett Yormark to actually like get on board with being open to this or perhaps nudging some of the schools toward it, I would just be fascinated to know what schools are actually engrossed in the conversations here, because Ross Dellinger's article said that there were like 5 to 10 schools that have had some pretty serious talks about this. Are they Big 12 schools, or is this, hey, we're counting, for instance, Florida State and Clemson because they may well need it to get out of the ACC, which obviously makes a ton of sense. Is it going to be like SEC and Big Ten schools looking around like, hey, we've got to get as greedy as we possibly can, and we're going to have to revenue share, so we need to make up that money here? I would think it's much more like, hey, if you're a Big 12 or an ACC school, you're looking around saying, yeah, we've got a revenue share to keep up, and we don't have the extra $30 or $40 million a year that they have from their TV deal. So unless everybody starts turning to this, I would think it would be more advantageous to schools in the Big 12 or the ACC right now, which is the point that I was making here. But to get a little further confirmation about all this, I did pull. Let me see if I can find it here real quick. Maybe I lost it. Did I lose it? No, here we go. Okay. I'm going to play you a quote from Ross Dellinger on 365 Sports, and you should all definitely go check out that interview. But let me make sure I get you this. Okay. To play you Ross Dellinger here, who backed up that Brett Yormark does seem to be somebody who's a little bit more open to this.
I think he has held discussions with those people about his league, and again, I think he's always looking, right, to grow revenue in some way, and always look to improve the conference. And part of that is opening yourself up to everything and trying to go down every avenue. And I think that's an avenue that he's at least looked at, just like a lot of the ADs in the country have. So not real surprised. He kind of comes from that world, right, that outside of college athletics world where the private capital, private equity concepts are quite popular.
Shout out to the 365 guys for getting that interview with Ross Dellinger. You guys should all go listen to that. It was really, really insightful as always. But the point he makes at the end, I think there is really a salient one, right? Like Brett Yormark comes from a world that would be much more accepting of private equity than your typical college athletic. Can we call him like a college athletics wonk? Just like somebody who's been around for a long time as an athletic director that then perhaps has worked their way up to being somebody that's in more of a leadership position, like a conference commissioner. And we're in a totally different world in general in college athletics with where that is at. But because, George Kliavkov came from the entertainment world. Brett Yormark came from the entertainment world. Kevin Warren didn't come from the traditional path, right? So Tony Petitti, more of like an entertainment TV sort of background. Like we're not in that world anymore in general, which is probably another reason why you're seeing more traction with this right now. But Yormark, I would think, would be looking at that like, hey, I've seen a lot of people in the entertainment world benefit from this. I've seen a lot of big companies benefit from this. He would be somebody that would be, I would imagine, much more open to this and looking around and trying to solve the problems of his league. I know that Mac Rhodes seems to be pretty tight with him, Baylor athletic director. And again, if we're reading into the interview he did on 365 Sports that was referenced earlier by Clint, where he said, look, we've got to get better at football. Well, how are you going to get better at football more so than just like having more money to be more competitive with all these schools right now? I think that's really it. More money is the biggest way that you can be more competitive in football, or at least maintain being as competitive as you are right now, not fall further behind. So I'd have to think that Yormark is looking at it like, hey, man, this actually could be something that really, really genuinely helps our league out quite a bit. Is it taking somewhat of a risk? Yes. But again, I will emphasize that they will tell you, it is private capital, not equity. Here is a quote from a Ross Dellinger article within the last couple of weeks about it. He references Weatherford, which is Drew Weatherford. So Weatherford describes collegiate athletic solutions as private capital, not equity. There's no ownership here, he says. Schools have the freedom to be flexible with the 50 to 200 million lump sum. It is meant to be spent with existing other capitals. Think traditional debt, booster donations, and bonds to offset expenses such as athletic revenue sharing, coaching salaries, and facility improvements. But the freedom is theirs. The CAS project does not require a management role inside the athletic department, as private equity often does, though they would aim to be advisors to presidents and athletic directors in managing revenue growth. Now, if you want to be really cynical about it, I can understand you coming around and saying, well, look, they're saying they're going to be advisors. Like, what does that mean? And John, you told me for years that like Texas has had too many cooks in the kitchen and too many people basically trying to be advisors. And like, that's a big problem that they have had. That's led to some of the issues that Texas has had and not being as competitive as they should. And you know what? Fair enough. There's probably a little bit of danger in that, but you might be at a point where the risk outweighs, or the rewards outweigh the risk, and that you really just have to take a chance. Like we might be in that territory right now is, I guess I would say, my fear or just my evaluation of where we are at right now. And if you're curious as to how this works, like how does the private capital, like how do those people get their money back? They earn a percentage on any new annual growth. Over a 10 to 20 year period, that percentage decreases from 22% in the first few years to 2% by its end as the firm meets its original principal investment. Weatherford describes this as taking a revenue royalty. Look, I understand. It's a little scary. It's a little jarring. None of that stuff sounds really great. And it sounds like you could be opening Pandora's box. You could be in for some trouble because of that. I get it. I do see some of it, but I also am now like, hey, maybe this is actually the type of thing that you're going to be forced into doing. Like maybe there are some benefits here that I didn't quite see at first. I got to be honest with you guys. This happened to me the other day on a podcast when I was doing the Frank Martin podcast in here. Anybody who was watching Three Ma, it's really hot in here. My AC is not kicking in the way that I want it to right now. So I'm like sweating and then the glasses fog up. So that's why I'm having to clean off the glasses here. I may have to go mess with the AC here for just one moment. I should have done it while I played the Ross Dellinger clip. You know what? This is me being smart on the fly, and I've got to get to a bunch of super chats here. So I promise I will in just one moment. But I'm going to just to drive the point home, and because I should have done this the first time, why don't I just play you this clip again real quick while I go take care of turning the AC up a little bit here.
I think he has held discussions with those people about his league, and again, I think he's always looking, right, to grow revenue in some way, and always look to improve the conference. And part of that is opening yourself up to everything and trying to go down every avenue. And I think that's an avenue that he's at least looked at, just like a lot of the ADs in the country have. So not real surprised. He kind of comes from that world, right, that outside of college athletics world where the private capital, private equity concepts are quite popular.
All right, we're back. Everything's good. And we talked to David. What's up, David? David says, feel bad for the Big 12. Great schools in a bad environment. Now tack on the new players pay. Washington and Oregon should have gone to the Big 12 to be in a league of equal peers pay-wise. Well, okay, if we're talking about reduced share, and I appreciate it, David. Thank you for your support of the channel as always. If we're talking about a reduced share, Oregon and Washington and what they're taking in initially while heading to the Big 10 from the Pac-12, then yes, I guess you could say like equals pay-wise. But Washington and Oregon are, and look, I love the Big 12. You guys know I'm a Big 12 guy to my core. Washington and Oregon are a step above in terms of just like what they are as brands and their revenue potential, their earning potential as college football programs. I think that much is pretty clear. So it may not be totally fair. It may not be totally fair to paint it like that. It would have been great. There was a time, I think there was a video at one point where I was like, hey, somebody out there says that this actually could be a possibility, that you might be able to land Oregon and Washington. There was a fleeting moment there where that seemed to be at least dangled, but that didn't come to fruition. Oregon and Washington have earned the right, I think, to be a step above there. And that's why, Oregon, frankly, right now, Oregon may go in and win the Big 10. Like Oregon is rolling. Dan Lanning is awesome. They are recruiting at an elite level. Like they've been as good at talent acquisition as basically anybody in the Big 10, maybe south of Ohio State. So it's hard for me to really knock Oregon too much. But David, if you guys are unaware, David, a Nebraska fan, he is a Big 10 guy. So look, I appreciate it. And you kind of nailed one of the things I like to talk about a lot, which is just that a lot of these Big 10 and SEC teams really won the birth lottery. It's just, what were you born into? Well, if you're Indiana, you're in a massive state that happened to be in the Big 10, or you're a massive university rather that happened to be located in the context of the Big 10. Like just geographically, you were there, and that league wound up doing better, not because of anything you were doing on the football field, certainly, not because of anything you were helping out with there, a Purdue, a Vanderbilt. You guys know all of the examples here. You just geographically, hell, and I know people will get mad at me for this, but Missouri. Missouri they happened to have two major metro areas in their state, and that mattered for a brief moment of time around 2010 when that wave of realignment was happening, and that helped get them into the SEC. And that's really it. It's not because of anything that Mizzou had done in football, really, throughout their history to be considered some big bad brand. It was just they won the birth lottery. So yeah, that is the problem for a lot of these schools here, and it's going to require creative solutions, perhaps like dipping into the private capital solution there. Oh boy, this just skipped way ahead on me. Sorry, guys. And got more super chats to get to. Jim, what's up, Jim? And thank you, David, once again. Jim, appreciate you. Jim says Brett Yormark is not searching for new expansion members. He did not say the Big 12 is not expanding. It is not searching because it has already identified them. He has to be evasive until schools start leaving the ACC. Jim, I think that's pretty good analysis, right? I think that's pretty good analysis. And that's you honestly said kind of what I was saying in a more concise manner there. Like, yeah, Brett Yormark knows in the back of his mind what's going on in the ACC and where he would like to go as a result of that, or probably not even so much like where he would like to go, but more of like who could be available, because that's really what it comes down to at this point. Like the ACC is not going to survive as it is currently situated. They will at absolute best, if they could somehow keep North Carolina and stop the bleeding, if just Florida State and Clemson were to leave, I suppose you can see a world in which the ACC survives. But it's in all likelihood going to bust up and bust open, and then it will be like, hey, is it going to be Louisville, Pitt, and who else? Like, who else will be available there? And you've got to be doing some back channeling. You also don't want to get tied up in anything legally. I mean, the last time you said open for business, it at least opened you up to some warfare through the media with the conference commissioner or the other guy. So you don't want to start anything with Jim Phillips. Like yes, you have to be very calculated and very careful about what it is that you do say. So yeah, not searching for new expansion members could get you around that if you have already identified them. Hey, we're not actively searching right now because we already know who it is. We just got to wait it out, right? We just got to wait until it actually happens. I think that's pretty good, Jim. I think that's pretty good. And that's the message that I was trying to put out there, right? Like he will say right now, yeah, we're not looking to expand right now. We're not doing any of that. That doesn't mean that you're not having those conversations. It's kind of like I would compare it to if you're an athletic director, you've always got to have the list of like, here's my short list for if my football coach were to leave tomorrow. Here's my short list if my basketball coach were to leave tomorrow. You got to have your short list. Well, here's my short list if the ACC were to explode tomorrow. What are the things that I need to be doing right now, back channeling or however it is that I can prepare myself to be in the best position to go pounce if and when that happens. So I think that's really what it is. Appreciate you, Jim. Thank you for your support of the channel. I appreciate it immensely, my friend. Julius, what's up, Julius? Julius, thank you so much. Always love having you here in the chat and greatly appreciate your support. One of our great BYU fans here, and one of the best names too, Julius Maximus. Man, you don't mess with Julius Maximus. But Julius says, "Howdy, John. Just want to show some support." Well, I appreciate that, my friend. Thank you. I visited Nevada this weekend. I placed the same amount on Utah winning the national championship at 25-1 as BYU just winning the Big 12 100-1. Which ticket is more likely to pay? I know it's Utah. Ooh, boy. It's a pretty good question, Julius. I love this question, actually. Man. I actually think it's BYU. I do, and it's no slight to Utah at all. But I think it's BYU because the Big 12 is really wide open. Like there are like 9 teams that have decent enough odds right now as we start the year that look like they could have a fairly realistic chance to win the league. It's going to be just so wide open and so competitive that feels like, having somebody who comes somewhat out of nowhere to win the Big 12 does not seem like it would be that wild of a storyline to anybody. You just polled a random college football fan right now. Utah winning the college football playoff would be a very wild storyline because we've already seen, we saw it a couple of years ago. TCU, a Big 12 team, made it there and lost by damn near 60 in the national championship game. So like that's how far up that bar is. I just think it's too steep of a hill to climb for anybody from the Big 12 or anybody from the ACC that's not named Florida State or maybe Clemson. But you guys that have been here for a while know my thoughts on that already, that Clemson has slipped permanently from the ledge of the elite to the very good. They have gone from elite to very good. So I might even cap that just at Florida State would be the one that would have an opportunity there. So it's a great question, Julius. I don't think either one is very likely. Like I would not expect BYU to make that sort of a charge. I very much respect you going and putting the wager down on it. But I think BYU would be the better bet there just because it's the Big 12. It's going to be a conference that's wide open, and you just don't really know what's going to happen or how this could all play out. And now you throw into the mix that you've got unbalanced schedules. Like, depending on how things go in the league with injuries or what teams actually are, it could be that BYU winds up somehow with like the easiest schedule of anybody and gets into the Big 12 championship game. Like, things like that are in play here, whereas Utah's not going to be able to just go acquire an upper echelon SEC roster overnight that would make up the like 58-point gap that we had from TCU against Georgia in the national championship game when they made it 2 years ago. So, like that one, Julius. Thank you. I'm hoping I'm going to get an update here from my guy, Daniel. I am Cat Fan in Huskerland, a.k.a. Daniel Osborne. Thank you, Daniel, for your support of the channel as always. I appreciate you, my friend. Daniel says, we'll watch later. I'm watching the Cats beating SEMO 7-0 in the 7th. Yeah, I was wanting a score update there, Daniel. I was like, get me a score update because K-State, I saw them jump out to a 7-0 lead while I was prepping and getting ready for the show. K-State could go to only their second super in school history with a win tonight over SEMO. They could also do it with a win tomorrow if they were to lose this game. But it seemed like they were really rolling, man. And this is crazy. I mean, Arkansas was the number 5 national seed. They went into Arkansas last night and beat the college baseball pitcher of the year. Put a 6 spot on him when he hadn't allowed more than 3 runs in a game all season. They put 6 up in 1 inning, held on for a 7-6 win. And now if they can take out SEMO, they're going to a super, which is amazing. Look, I feel I have not been able to watch. I just haven't had the bandwidth to watch near as much baseball, but I feel a particular affinity for the program because I spent 7 years doing play-by-play for K-State baseball, being one of the 3 main play-by-play voices that were doing K-State baseball. So I've done a ton of games. I've done some traveling with them. I just know what all goes into it. I know the disadvantages that K-State has when it comes to baseball, and I just could not be happier for those guys. So it's awesome. Awesome to see. Love that. And it would be the only the second super in school history and the first since 2013. So it'll be the first in a while. So appreciate you, Daniel. Thank you for being here. Thank you for heading back to watch it later and always supporting the channel as fervently as you do, my friend. Appreciate you. Aloha, Nate. What's up, Nate? Aloha, Nate. If schools are paying future profits to private capital, does that affect nonprofit status? If schools are paying taxes on those billion-dollar TV deals and paying back private capital, is it worth it? Oh, boy. I try to be honest with you guys when you hit me with stuff like this sometimes. Way out over my skis, man. I have no idea. No idea what that would do to nonprofit status. Absolutely none. I would not even know where to start in speculating on that. So you might be right. Maybe I would imagine that they have like vetted that. I would imagine that they have a pretty good idea of whether or not something like that would happen. I wouldn't think you would get into it not having a clear answer on that or a clear idea of where that would be going. But I don't know. That's a good, solid question to raise. And I guess we would probably have to ask like Drew Weatherford or one of these athletic directors who is apparently talking to the Drew Weatherfords of the world about the private capital situation. I wish I could provide a better answer for you on that. And then, you'd have to have someone running the numbers. Like, if then we are going to have to start paying how does that money compare to what we'd be getting from private capital? I'm sure it would affect it a lot. So there would be a lot of number crunching to go on there, and maybe it wouldn't be worth it. My guess would be, Nate, I would just say by the fact that Dellinger mentioned in his story, and did I have that paragraph pulled up where he talked about 5 to 10? Weatherford and Cardinal are seeking 5 to 10 programs to invest as little as $50 million, as much as $200 million. They're in deep conversations with a handful of programs. Okay. Deep conversations with a handful of programs. And there was a quote from one athletic director who said, quote, "If you want to compete at this level, private equity and capital is really important. I've been talking to these people for 10 to 12 months. I haven't pulled the trigger, but is this what you are going to need to be successful and survive? Yes, it is." That's a quote from an athletic director. We don't know who it is, but that is a quote from an athletic director who's been talking to them for 10 to 12 months. I would think if you've been talking to them for 10 to 12 months and there are multiple schools that have been doing this, that they've got some kind of an idea that either it wouldn't affect that nonprofit status, or if it did, the numbers would still work in their favor. That would just be my guess without actually knowing the answer to that question. But it's a good question to ask. Aloha, Nate. It's a good question to ask, man. I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody supporting the channel tonight. David popping back in. NFL is nonprofit and makes dollars off of TV rights. So there's David with a little insight into that question, Aloha, Nate, that you just raised. Got about 15 minutes or so left on the stream tonight. If you guys want to be a part of things, click the $ below the chat box. That is how you can submit your donation to the show tonight. Make it a super chat, which will ensure that you get on. Appreciate all of you who do that. But if you want to just click like on the video, I would love that. That is a very easy and free way to support the channel. If you're watching afterwards, leave me a comment in the comment section. Look, if you're totally against this idea, private capital, private equity, however you want to spin it, whatever you want to say about it, I'm open to it. Just let me know about it in the comments. That's an easy way to do it. And John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo is an easy way to do it as well if you're not able to catch this live tonight. Okay, the other story I really wanted to get to. That's right. So the Big 12, the SEC, and the Big 10 have actually come to the defense of the ACC and ESPN in court. I mean, that's a headline. Like, if you want to just cut it off right there, the Big 12, the SEC, and the Big 10 have come to the ACC's defense and ESPN's defense by proxy here in the Florida State and Clemson lawsuits. I'm going to read to you an article from the Tampa Bay Times. This is Matt Baker, who's another guy that you've heard here on the channel. But he says the 3 power conferences have joined with the ACC in urging a Tallahassee court to protect the ACC's TV deals with ESPN. So there's the hook. There's the hook, right? You're sitting there saying, well, why would they do this? Like, we were just talking about the Big 12 circling the waters as the shark, like waiting for more realignment, waiting for the ACC to blow up to go take one of those schools. Like, why would they then join in and help the ACC in court? Well, it's because they don't want their TV deals out there with ESPN as well. They don't want any of that. ESPN, I can remember Greg Flugar asking the question a while back, like, why is ESPN so prickly about this getting out there? Like, what could potentially be hidden there? We do actually get some answers here in this article. The article says the conference's unity came through court filings last week in response to a complaint by Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody last month. Moody accused the ACC of breaking Florida's public records law by not providing a copy of the league's TV contracts with ESPN. Those documents are potentially relevant in the ongoing dueling lawsuits. The ACC, SEC, Big 10, and Big 12 argued in Leon County Circuit Court. Here it is. You need a law degree to cover college football and college athletics these days. Now, if you want to cover the Big 12, here we are in Leon County Court. Somehow it all comes back to Tallahassee. Everybody, if you're going to compete in college athletics, apparently you've got to be involved in a Leon County Circuit Court somehow. But they argued in Leon County Circuit Court records that the documents must remain confidential to protect trade secrets. Though some financial details have become public, the ACC said the ESPN contracts have other trade secrets too. Everything from how football broadcasts are selected to operational costs, sponsorship information, signage, future payouts, and conference composition provisions. Kept confidential, they plainly confer the ACC a competitive advantage and benefit, the filing said. Okay, let's review this list here. How football broadcasts are selected. I started thinking about this. I was like, man, I guess there really are like a lot of things that go into all this that we don't totally know exactly how it works. I mean, we know that we get like the TV selections usually just under 2 weeks in advance. Sometimes it goes to the 6-day window, but what is happening? What is the exact process for that? Could some feelings get hurt if it's out there? How exactly these football broadcasts are selected? What are the stipulations there? Like, could it just cause more drama and people wondering what the hell is going on? In addition to ESPN saying, well, then Fox and everybody else would know what we're doing here and they could base their contracts off of that, et cetera, et cetera. Sponsorship information, signage, future payouts. That's a pretty big one to slip in there. Future payouts, structuring things, things like, hey, we've actually got an option to terminate this contract early in 2027 instead of 2036. That's already obviously been out there. But if there are more provisions like that, and I think that was like probably where Greg was coming from when I first initially heard him say that a while back. Like, are there more things like that that are in these that they just don't want us to know about? There could be. Even conference composition provisions. So, okay, are there things in these contracts that say if your league expands, if your league dwindles, how does that affect what the contract actually is? Yes, those are all things that I can see why they wouldn't want out there. Those are all things that could cause some drama. The ACC's conference competitors agreed in an amicus brief. In addition to the financial terms, their TV contracts with ESPN and others include details like commercial spots, benefits to corporate sponsors, and necessary accommodations for producing the broadcast. Okay, there's even more details about what they could be worried about getting out there. Commercial spots, how these commercials are all working. That to me seems like something that could be important to ESPN. That would be a competitive disadvantage if a Fox were to get a hold of that, like how you're actually negotiating with your advertising partners for commercial spots, benefits to corporate sponsors, necessary accommodations. If TV networks knew a conference was willing to offer a specific package of games at a certain price to one broadcaster, they could use that knowledge to negotiate against the league. That seems pretty plainly obvious. If they knew a conference was willing to offer a specific package of games at a certain price to one broadcaster, well, you could just go undercut it, right? Hey, we'll take it for, whatever your number is, 10%. We'll take it 10% less. 10% less, and we'll do the same thing for you. Quote, requiring disclosure of those media agreements would make the conference's confidential strategies available to their competitors and other potential contracting counterparties. The Big 10, Big 12, and SEC brief said. Side note, can we consider this the alliance? Is this a new alliance? Do we have an alliance between the Big 10, Big 12, and SEC? Feels kind of alliance-y to me here on this thing. Did they write it on the back of a napkin, like the gentleman's agreement from the alliance, the OG alliance, the original alliance that we had? We can only hope. ESPN went farther in its brief. The network said releasing its contracts would allow competitors to, quote, gain a leg up on ESPN in the next round of negotiations with rights holders. Florida would be harmed, its filing said, because ESPN and other networks might balk at doing business with state schools if their contracts could become public. That's an interesting thought, an interesting take on this. Like, this is all being challenged by the Attorney General on the grounds of Florida open records law. So if that were to happen and they were to say, well, yeah, actually, these laws require that this gets out there, then you're going to scare off people from wanting to do deals that are going to be involved in the state of Florida. No one's going to want to do that if their deals are going to then become public knowledge here, or could become public knowledge based on somebody really challenging this. So there are a lot of tentacles to that. It doesn't seem to me like it's anything crazy nefarious going on. I think they do have a pretty good point here that there's some proprietary information that could be harmful if it got out. But I still don't think there was an expectation from people that you would have all the schools come running to the ACC and ESPN's defense. Like, I know I texted a bit, or I DM'd a bit with Doug Rohan, who you guys have seen give excellent legal analysis of this case from the Florida State side of things. I said, like, is that common? Like, did you expect that? And he said, no, I was surprised for sure. So that is not something that I think was really anticipated here. And it does sound like, too, I listened to Doug on College Football Addiction talking about that there may be an element of like some political grandstanding going on here by the Attorney General as well, trying to kick up some support from Florida State folks, I guess it would sound like here, with really challenging this and wanting those to, just needling the ACC and needling ESPN as they are embroiled in that legal battle right now that, of course, revolves around Florida State, who is very, very upset about how things went last year in the college football playoff and in the ACC in general. All right, let me talk to Matthew here real quick. Appreciate you, Matthew. Thank you so much for being here. Matthew says, been a while since I caught a live stream. Appreciate you keeping with it and the bonus short videos throughout the weeks. Hey, I'm glad to hear the feedback on that. I have been going and like cutting out segments from the live shows just to give you a segment of it. Like if you don't want to sift through the entire live show and one part of it is more intriguing to you than another, then you can just wait for that video throughout the week. So giving you guys as many options there as possible with the content. And on the content front, I shortly, I should be doing even more. And I will get you guys more info on that coming up. So glad to hear the feedback on that. I had someone tell me earlier today they really enjoyed the Nick Pardini interview and just the interviews in general lately. That's something I'm trying to lean into more because I've gotten a lot of great perspectives from that. And I thank you, everybody who has weighed in on that. And those of you that have enjoyed it. So Matthew, thank you so much, sir. Appreciate you being here and appreciate, as always, your great support of the channel, my friend. Thank you. Thank you very much. Looks like we've got, Matthew. love the Alliance drop. Good George K memories. Yeah. Did we talk about on the live show how the Pac-12 network was just like having that garage sale, like throwing everything out there, like 80% off, just trying to sell it the other day? I told somebody to grab me a George Kliavkoff jersey. I have not heard back. I don't know if anybody actually got that for me or not, but I would love a good old Georgie K jersey. Would probably be a number one, because George is number one. Nobody better. George Kliavkoff number one Pac-12 jersey. That would be excellent. Somebody wants to. My birthday is coming up in a couple of months. If you want to go and get me an early birthday present, that would be amazing. Appreciate it, Matthew. Alan, what's up, Alan? Alan says, John, it's actually a compliment to the Big 12 if Yormark attracts private equity, which only follows success. Our Big 12 doesn't have the same SEC funding options by Mizzou and Kentucky to IPO their meth labs. Man, Alan, I was not expecting that. That is really funny. Alan is typically, I feel like, Alan, you're typically pretty buttoned up, right? And I always love your comments, but I have not seen you just go in at Mizzou and Kentucky too. Which, as a Kansas fan, I can understand, obviously, the Mizzou rivalry, but then you got to deal with Kentucky basketball fans who are, of all the fans that I've dealt with on the internet and my Twitter history and, being snarky and kind of an a-hole sometimes and getting embroiled in fan fights, boy, Kentucky basketball fans are about as bad as it gets. So if you're a Kansas fan and you're having to deal with them on a regular basis because they're your peer as, like the Champions Classic level basketball program in the country, that is pretty rough. So I understand it and I get it and I love it, Alan. That is hilarious. It's made even more funny by the fact that I did not see it coming. Tremendous stuff there from Alan, who says Rock Jock Jayhawk. Alan. Yeah, it would be a compliment, and hopefully Brett Yormark is able to do it. And hopefully Brett Yormark he seems like a dynamic enough guy that if there are people in the league that really want to do it, that he is somebody that could actually shepherd that connection and make it happen. So be very, very curious, very intrigued to see where it goes. Oh, Alan throws in, he's still upset by the KU SEC rumor. Alan, Kansas fan that very much does not want to leave the Big 12, not a fan of the SEC move there. And we could call it like rumor / report, Greg Flugar I trust. I think he is pretty plugged in, and his track record would speak to that. And I think logically, it just makes some sense that the SEC could be looking at basketball brands next, because they've kind of tapped out the football brands and they need people to lose football games anyway. That's not to say that Kansas obviously is a bad program right now or anything at all, but they may not be on the level of 60% of the league there. You guys get the point. Basketball would be the next way to try and max out some extra value. I could see how it turns into like a Kansas and Duke sort of pursuit there to round out your basketball. And then if you're throwing in North Carolina, those are the types of things that you could be doing. So I understand where it comes from as well, and how that could be grounded somewhat in reality. But I appreciate your stance on it, Alan. Alan does not budging on that, wants Kansas to stay in the Big 12. So I love you for it, Alan. You know I love you for that. All right, we are at the 1 hour mark. I think I'm going to call it before I get to this story, and maybe I can do something on this later this week. God, the whole story, SEC propaganda. They're trying to already start the narrative that, hey, we need to get a 9-3 team in the playoff over an 11-1 Big 12 team. That's the whole crux of the article. We're going to hear a ton about that. It's like, hey, schools like Texas have gone out and scheduled like Michigan this year. There's Alabama and Texas played last year. They've done all these crazy non-con games to up strength the schedule. Plus, we've got this new conference. We should be reaping rewards from that. We should get benefits from that in the playoff. Enough to make you sick, but that's what it is, and what everybody's going to have to deal with. It splintered into, speaking of Mizzou fans, Allen, Missouri, taking shots at like Oklahoma State's schedule. And then you go look at Mizzou's schedule. It's actually quite easy for an SEC schedule, and would have 2 ranked teams on it, just like Oklahoma State's would. I digress. That's kind of your too long did not read summation of what was going on there. But I appreciate everybody who is here. You can do a couple things to help me out. Like the video on your way out the door if you haven't. Leave a comment in the comment section of the video underneath. Are you in on the private equity thing? Should Big 12 schools be doing that? Let me know what you think in the comments there. Make sure you go check out the Ross Dellinger video from 365 Sports. If you haven't watched the entire interview, I would highly, highly suggest doing that as well. If you want to contribute to the channel on Venmo, it is John-Kurtz-4. But you can also just tell friends about it. Spread the word on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, wherever you're at on social media. Tell your friends, tell your family. Facebook groups, if you're in fans of whatever your school is, fans of the Big 12, like let everybody know in there as well that this is a great place to be. So appreciate all of you who consistently support the channel here. Can't thank you all enough. Thank you for being here. I will talk to you all very soon.